I was pretty much in my head for most of my life from a very young age. A lot of people say children are so connected to innocence, to totality, to spirit, to awareness, to the divine, so naturally. But because I grew up in such a stressful environment where I was in fight or flight and freeze and appease and fawn at such an early age, quite a loud, scary, abusive environment. Because of that, I've pretty much been in survival brain for most of my life, been suffering for most of my life. Yeah. Been in my ego for most of my life. And it wasn't until 6.5 years ago that I actually had an awakening, so to speak, had enough awareness over the pain of my predicament, had awareness come in for me to recognize the fact that I was stuck in my head, that I was able to see that truth. And so just taking stock of the ground we've covered so far in this episode, freedom, the only true form of freedom is when we actually have awareness over our consciousness, awareness over our life. Because while we don't have awareness, we are just completely reactive and driven by fear and what I call this head hypnosis, because I, again, divide our brain into these two aspects: head consciousness, heart consciousness, could be fear consciousness, and fulfillment or freedom consciousness. So because we all have these two things, freedom exists when we have awareness and we can actually choose how we want to live with our lives, have presence when we want, like in our life, in our experience of life. But when we are taken by head hypnosis, like I refer to it, we're taken by head hypnosis, we go into this hypnotic state where our head is ruling our life. It's calling the shots. We're run off reactive, subconscious programming. We have our head controlling our decision making to keep us comfortable, to keep us safe. We are sedated with addictive tendencies, and we're usually in some form, even if it's subtle, of stress response. And we're essentially being controlled by that most powerful force in the entire universe, as Johnny Pollard refers to it as, ignorance. We're stuck in ignorance. We're ignorant. We have forgotten. We are sedated. Tara Brach, the amazing kind of Buddhist-led spiritual guru, an older woman now that's been doing this work for so many decades, that was the author of Radical Kindness, Radical Compassion, just an amazing radical acceptance and radical compassion, amazing thought leader and leader and guru. And she calls this trance. You enter a trance-like state. Napoleon Hill in Outwitting the Devil, the book, he calls this drifting, when we forget. So you can call it ignorance, you could call it being reactive, you could call it drifting, ignorance, forgetting. Again, I call it head hypnosis. Eckhart Tolle also calls it hypnosis. So the reason I'm reeling off these different leaders is because I want you to know that this is not just me making up theory. This is like recognized. Even Carl Jung, who's like one of the godfathers of modern psychology, a student of Sigmund Freud. Even Carl Jung calls this living below the line. It's like when we're forgotten, when we're in that animal. Again, Joe Dispenza calls this the animal. Okay. So we're reactive in this state. And this is what's all of these gurus causes suffering when we're in this state. but we are literally programmed to have this part of our, it's like one of the 3 areas of the brain. Yeah. It's the oldest aspect of our brain. It's the amygdala, but we've evolved to develop our cortex, and in our prefrontal cortex, that's where higher, more, I'm going to say the thing that differentiates the human race versus other animal species is this aspect of our brain, which is the most modern aspect of our brain, the most evolved aspect of our brain, that gives us the ability to connect to things like intuition and imagination, and to have conscious thought. And it's the being aspect in human being. It's that heart aspect in the head heart aspects of our consciousness that I refer to. And so just to, again, come back to the whole point of this podcast is that it doesn't matter how much work you've done on yourself. If you are triggered and you're in fear consciousness, you are going to be suffering. And we don't outgrow or out-evolve our ego because it's tied in and chained to it's in our brain. And so there are a lot of thought leaders and gurus that say that they've healed their trauma and they've had an ego death and that part's gone. That's just simply not true. Even Eckhart Tolle still has an amygdala. So if he gets triggered, if someone just punches him in the face, or he gets into a life, like a near-death experience, his amygdala is going to fire off. He's going to forget the truth of what he is. He's no longer enlightened in that moment. He's connected to his amygdala. He's in his fear consciousness. He's in his survival brain, and he's going to be suffering. And so it doesn't matter how far along the journey of your spiritual evolution you go down, you've still got your head and you've still got your heart. And that really is one of the key messages I want to give in this episode. It's just a reminder that all of us have a head and heart, and neither of them are going anywhere. Even if you become really reactive and you're in a real challenging period of your life where you're binge eating and sedating and doing all these things that keep you reactive and stressed, and you're just going through a real challenging time, your heart's still there, patiently sitting there, as timeless love, timeless awareness. It doesn't go anywhere. And when we connect to spirit, or we're aware, let's say you have a beautiful meditation and you remember, you're like, wow, I'm connected to spirit in this moment. You have that conscious awareness reinstated. Well, the head's still there. You're not enlightened. You're going to oscillate between these 2 aspects of your mind, the head and the heart. And so true freedom is when you have the capacity to choose the steps you take with your life. True freedom is only obtainable from a place of awareness.